Hello, good afternoon, everybody. This is the 509 Divine Pines podcast. I hope you guys are having an amazing day today. Look, it's the new year, and with the new year, we have new information. You guys should be headed in a new direction. We shouldn't be stationed in a complacent place. Complacency is very boring, and if your mind is stuck, go ahead and find a new way. Find something creative to learn in life and love it. My guest today is Hayley Ramsey, a tour guide in the UK. She is the author of a new book with Scott Walter, The Origins of the what is it, Divine Goddess? Sorry, I apologize. The book title is The Bringer of Life. I apologize. And it discusses the origins of the goddess veneration and follows the goddess through her history chronologically through the rise and falls and civilizations around the world. Now, hello, Hayley. How are you doing today? Can you
How are you?
discuss a little bit about yourself? I'm doing great. This is the West Coast, so you're on the West Coast. We are feeling amazing over here. The sun is shining. Hey, we love it, don't we?
Yes. Well, my background kind of begins, I guess, when I fell in love with history, and that was from the time I was a small child. I always did in the legends of the Holy Grail, King Arthur, the Sword and the Stone. All these stories were very attractive to me from a very young age. And so as I got older, I started to see the connections that were there between secret societies and the legends of the Grail. The places like Rosyln Chapel, as seen in the Da Vinci Code, became very attractive to me to visit, and I did so. I visited Scotland for the first time in 2019, actually, to take my dad's ashes home to his ancestral castle, which was Dalhousie Castle. And while there, I was visiting sites like Rosyln, and I fell in love with Scotland and decided to come back and do research and give tours. So I lived there for half the year now.
It's an amazing time over there. I'll be honest, if I were all around these archaeological sites, I would just be so blown away by the energy and just the speculation of the history. You said you took your father's ashes. That sounds like a story and a theory about Rosalind itself, where Sir William was taking the heart of his king, Robert the Bruce, to the Holy Land. Sounds pretty correlating. I'll be honest. When you start delving into these topics, it's almost like we recreate life itself in the fashion, and we live throughout the ancients' journey. And this is fascinating. The Da Vinci Code and Rosslyn Chapel have been very attractive in my eyes for decades. I mean, literally, as a kid, I would just be reading the Bible. I would be studying all these different types of ruins, archaeological across thousands of years. I mean, literally, we know that these things go back decades, thousands of years, like no matter across the world, right? Now, Rosslyn Chapel is it's just a mind-blowing place. I'll be honest. This is a great conversation we're about to have today, and I'm gonna start it off. No videos or photos have been allowed recently. Is that still correct? Is it still like?
Yes, only inside. You're not allowed to take pictures, but outside the chapel, you're allowed to take photographs of the outside of it. It's just inside, and it's just to protect the artifacts that are in there, and you can get special permission. Want to use a photo for your book, like I have done and Scott's done, you can ask for permission. They'll usually grant it.
Okay, well, if my viewers know anything about what's inside the chapel, they'll understand why there's no photos or video allowed. So just to begin, the chapel was founded by William St. Clair, and according to legend, it hosts the treasure of the fabled Knights Templar, which might just be the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, sacred skulls, and I mean the symbology that is found inside goes to show. Am I correct?
Yes, that is a great point, because Rosslyn Chapel is said to hold a treasure, which first was supposedly in the castle, which is just below where the chapel is now. The castle was built first, dating back to the 1300s. The chapel came later. There had been a chapel that was part of the big fortress of Rosyln Castle when it was first built. Then later on, William the Builder, who you were talking about, he was the one that had started building Rosyln. Now, at the castle, there's a story of a white lady who guards a treasure of Rosyln Castle. So the two might be related. I've also heard local stories about tunnels that run from the castle to the chapel. The chapel is up on a hill while the castle is actually down below just a bit. It's a short walk, but I stayed in the castle myself, and I heard the legend from the woman who gave me the key to the castle when I was renting it. I stayed there for 3 nights by myself, and it was crazy having an entire castle to myself, but totally worth it. And it's just, you can go rent it on the Chapel Trust website. But in any case, the woman at the chapel gave me the key, and she said to me, "Now you need to watch out for the white lady." And I said, "Oh, what white lady?" And she began to explain to me the story of the white lady who guards the treasure of Rosyln Castle. And supposedly she comes at midnight and she sings a song, and she sings to the worthy of the location of the treasure. Now, I heard from somebody else, from a friend, that at one point they'd been at Rosyln Castle, and he had been assisting in doing repairs on the stonework there. And at one point there was something beneath the stairs that opened up, and there was some kind of armory found there, old swords and armor and that sort of thing. But whether this is entirely accurate, I'm not sure. This was something a friend of a
Well. Now let's dial it back. So this chapel is very related to the poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, where Herod the Great rebuilt a temple mount on top of where the Temple of Solomon. So this is a very symbolic place. If we know anything about the Temple of Solomon and the lesser known keys of Solomon and his magic works, I can see that the Rosyln Chapel would fall under the lines of a magical place. Speaking of magical, there's things like portals that are right here. Now, dialing it back, right? The poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, can you touch on that?
Yeah, so the connection between Knights Templar and Rosyln actually goes back to ultimately to Bannockburn. Really, if we talk about the Knights Templar, we know for a fact that at Bannockburn there was a story of the Knights Templar being the secret weapon. Now, there's documents that Scott and I've been working on that would confirm that the Templars were assisting, and in fact were the secret weapon, and they were assisting the St. Clairs, who were also fighting at Bannockburn. That is totally, you cannot argue that. But Robert the Bruce himself was actually a descendant of a Templar, a Crusader knight. And when Robert the Bruce became King of Scotland, he was excommunicated from the church because he killed a man inside of a chapel, which was a big no-no to the Catholic Church. And therefore, he was no longer Catholic. And Scotland, he was trying to fight on his own with no assistance from the Roman Catholic Church anymore. So when the Knights Templar were exiled from Europe on Friday the 13th, 1307 in October, Robert the Bruce said, "Hey guys, you want to come over here and help me out?" And so they said sure, because they had nowhere else to go. But Robert the Bruce had great use for elite trained special forces. These guys were fighting soldiers, while in Scotland at the time, Robert the Bruce was basically just mustering the support of the local farmers and such. So to have these soldiers that were specifically trained in the arts of battle was a huge help. And so the Templars end up there with him, and some had already been in Scotland during the put down at this time. So you had 2 different commanderies, preceptories. One was in Mary Cooter, which is actually now a hotel where we lectured this summer, which is really cool. And that's up in Aberdeen on the coast in the northeast part of Scotland. And then the other one was Ballintraach, which is down by Rosyln, and that's called Temple. There's nothing left of it now. There's just an old chapel with the original blocks that were used to build that. And so the Templar lands there backed right up to Rosyln. And some of the Sinclairs were Crusader knights as well, fighting in the Holy Land. And obviously we had one of the Sinclairs that went and took the heart of Robert the Bruce, or attempted to, before he was killed on his way there. And his grave inside Rosyln Chapel actually says Templar Knight on it. So if we go back further to look at the origins of the Knights Templar and the Sinclairs, there was always a close connection there, because the Sinclairs were Catholics, but they also practiced the old ways of the Celtic people. So outwardly they were Catholic, but inwardly they practiced the goddess worshiping religion, amongst other things at this time. So whenever it came time to fight for Scotland, they were able to muster the support of the Templars. And they lived in a very, very beautiful part of Scotland, which also already had ties to Pictish legends of characters like King Arthur that was said to live in the same area where Rosyln is today. And obviously, there's been the idea that Rosyln actually might mean rose line or bloodline. Rosyln actually is two Gaelic words that mean essentially it's like a high waterfall, which there is that in the area as well. But I think that there is obviously multiple levels or layers to the meaning of the name Rosyln, and the Templars had a huge stake in Rosyln. And to hide the treasure beneath Rosyln Chapel, or to hide some treasure, wouldn't surprise me. What we do know about Rosyln Castle is that it was a reliquary, a library of ancient documents, likely that the Templars retrieved and brought back from the Holy Land. But that is what was so important, that at one point in time, when there was a fire in the castle, I can't remember if it was Henry or William, I think it was a William, he threw out these chests of boxes out of the window, literally, while the castle is burning. He's not so worried about his women and the children and everything else. He's more concerned about these documents and throwing them out the window to make sure they're safe first and foremost. So they had to have been pretty important documents for him to do such a thing. And at the same time, he had monks that were living just below on one of the lower floors of the castle, and they would study and they would write things down. They were copying documents. This part of the castle is not inhabited now, but you can still go down there and check it out if you rent the castle. So there were monks living there, Rosyln likely with Templar ties. And earlier, before the Battle of Bannockburn, which was in 1314, if we go back about 11 years, in 1303, there was the Battle of Rosyln, which took place and actually was won. It's one of the bloodiest battles ever fought in Scottish soil, but nobody talks about it. It was a smaller battle. Well, it was smaller in the way of knowing. Nobody knows about this battle, but it was actually massive. If the numbers that I've researched are actually true. This happened in 1303 when there was a Lady Margaret Ramsey from Dalhousie, which I am a Ramsey, and my dad's family came from Dalhousie Castle. His ancestors.
I have correlations to Sinclair's. I'll just say that right now. So we're speaking for eons, like of decades and knowledge, like right here. So this is meant to be. All right, let's continue.
So at that point, there was a Lady Margaret Ramsey, and she was courting a Henry St. Clair from Rosyln Castle. But at the time, the English were commanding Edinburgh Castle. So there was an English governor by the name of John Seagrave, and he was very much taken with Lady Margaret Ramsey. And when he found out that she was betrothed to Henry Sinclair, he was not happy. And in fact, William Wallace was actually at Sir Henry's knighting when he was made a knight. And it was Lady Margaret that he chose to be the queen of the day that knighted him, that did the honors. And so William Wallace was there, and there's a cave nearby Rosyln as well that you can visit that was the cave of William Wallace. But back to the knighting, it was at this knighting ceremony that they announced their betrothal. John Seagrave found out, got upset, heartbroken, angry, wrote to the King of England and said, hey, can we march on Scotland now? And once that happened, he marched into Scotland with 3 different armies. They broke the army up into 3 different armies and went 3 different directions. One went to Rosyln, one went to Dalhousie and laid siege to Dalhousie. The one at Rosyln, there was one other one that went a little bit further west. And all 3 battles were ultimately won. But when it came down to Rosyln, at that point in time, they had a heads up because the men had alerted them that this army was coming. So Henry St. Clair and his father had decided to shout out to a local prior who was a Cistercian monk. And he was a veteran Knights Templar. He'd fought in the Holy Land. And so with the help of this Templar, this is in 1303, he is instructing the men of Rosyln in battle strategy and tactics on how to defeat the English and to use the terrain of the area that the English didn't know so well. And so when they did this, supposedly there was approximately 20,000 Englishmen that were marching onwards towards them, and there was only like 5,000 or 8,000 Scots. There wasn't too many of them. But by the end of the battle, only 10% of the English army survived. So we're talking maybe around 1 to 2,000, right? And the remaining ones that didn't escape were captured, one of them being John de Seagrave. So the Templars had, in fact, helped there. And one of my favorite parts of the story actually was when Prior Abernathy, which was the name of this veteran Knights Templar, Abernathy was giving this pep talk to the guys at Rosyln, to all the men that were going to fight here, and probably to some of his own men that he had ushered in and called upon from the other hospital, Knights Hospitaller Preceptory that was nearby. It's called Torficken. He had called upon those knights there as well, who came to their aid additionally. And he's trying to give these men a pep talk about how, you know, these other two battles had been won, the one at Dalhousie, the one that was a bit further off. And so it would be God's will for them to win this day, to win the third and final battle. And so as this is happening, he points in the distance and did you lose me?
You're good. You're good.
Sorry, somebody was calling. But anyway,
It's okay.
yeah, so at that point in time, he points to in the distance, and on a hill, which was now it's called the Pentland Hills. On a hill, there was a fiery cross, and he said, "Look at that! You know, it must be a sign from God that we're to win this day." So they look over, and everybody's just in shock, seeing this hill, you know, light up in fire, the fiery cross there. And at that point, everybody's rallied and ready to go, and they won. And so at the end of it all, when there's only 10% of the English troops remaining, one of them being John Seagrave, he ends up ransoming John Seagrave, the man who tried to steal his woman, off to the English crown. And then Lady Margaret Ramsey of Dalhousie and Henry Sinclair supposedly lived happily ever after.
All right, all right. Now, I did hear a lot about that through the Zeno manuscript, and that is a very true manuscript. Is that correct? The Zeno manuscript, where it recounts the voyage written by the Venetian about William St. Clair's great-great-grandfather, correct?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sweet. Okay, just for my viewers to go ahead and get some knowledge on. Now, it is known that, well, actually speculated, you might go ahead and touch on this, that these Templars were in possession of relics from Solomon's Temple, and that is what they took over to the Rosyln Chapel. Yeah?
Yeah, so, you know, it's a good question, because I know that they brought some things, as a matter of fact. What exactly they brought, I don't know. But I do know that they brought treasure to some islands around Scotland, and likely to a cave that was on the east coast, not far from Rosyln. And it was, in fact, left in it. There was some treasure initially brought to a cave there, along with the first fleet of Templars that came over. And this is actually near another castle belonging to the Sinclairs of Rosyln. So I do believe that some of that treasure probably ended up with the Sinclairs at Rosyln, because later on we know that the Sinclairs are making their voyages to the New World, to America. And if the journals of Henry Sinclair are accurate, then they were depositing this treasure to later fund New Jerusalem, a Free Templar state.
Right. Okay. That is fascinating. I'm looking at things like inside of Rosyln Chapel. There is very peculiar architecture. There is 13 crisscrossing archers in the form of the Chaldean pattern. They host small sandstone cubes that protrude at regular intervals like teeth. They have 213 stone cubes that were carved. It says when Leonardo da Vinci and Christopher Columbus were schoolboys, so around the same time. And these 213 stone cubes are on 17 or 18 per arch. Each one bears a geometric pattern, a diamond, a rosette, an inverted circle. In all, 12 patterns repeat as on a strand of DNA. The same sequence of 3 symbols appears on the base of 2 of the arches. For instance, one arch contains long stretches in which just one symbol is repeated. At the base of each arch, save for the first and last, is exquisitely carved stone angels, either playing instruments or singing from a hymnal. Some of the stone angels appear to be making hand gestures with Masonic meaning, with their childlike faces and great bird wings. Is that also true about this? Can you speak on that?
Yeah, so the angels that are there's actually one of them, which I thought this was really neat, at Dalhousie Castle, which is a hotel now as well. And I work there with them frequently on the tours that I do. In the chapel at Dalhousie, there is actually a replica of one of those angels holding up a heart that's in there. I believe it's the one that's holding a heart. It might be something else, but anyway, those angels you see all around, and they're very beautiful. The point you're making about DNA is an excellent point. I've also read a bit. I'm not super familiar, but I've read a bit about how there is something to do with the archaeoacoustics here, because with the
cymatics.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So
yes, I was reading on that, but I think by pianist Stuart Mitchell, that this holds a key and a code, and the angels are the key to deciphering it.
I've not heard this. That's interesting.
Okay, so go along. So go for what you were saying. I thought it was the same thing.
No. Good. I was just going to the stone. Going back to the 30 numbers you're talking about. The problem with this is that Rosyln Chapel is incomplete. The building was never finished. So what's there now was not the final. It was not meant to be the final product, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. There was meant to be more. There's only, it's just the nave there that you have in Rosyln. So imagine if the building had been completed, there would probably be a lot more that would help us understand what is going on in just the small bit of Rosyln Chapel we have today. And with that said, there's all these stories about what lies beneath Roslyn's crypt. And in Da Vinci Code, you see them go down into this crypt. But in reality, the room they filmed that in is just a room that's down in, it's in the crypt that you can go into now, just off to the side. And it was actually the room where the priest would change his robes. So the actual crypt beneath Rosyln, they haven't confirmed that it exists, but we all know it exists. What's in there is said to be the armed bodies, the bodies that are in armor, the knights of the Sinclair lineage that are all laid to rest beneath the crypt. Now, what else might be down there? Who knows? There's all kinds of stories.
Okay, I mean, that is fascinating. That is definitely next level. If we look at some of the other relics, I'm going to go ahead and read another piece of information that I've seen about this. More than 100 pagan green men peer from the walls, and the 7 deadly sins dance across an arc. Devils, dragons, animals, knights, ladies, and of course Jesus and other religious imagery make their appearance in stone. I believe even ancient languages appear. One carving is supposed to represent the death mask of Robert Bruce. 8 Nordic dragons form a ring around the base of one ornate pillar. White dozens of Sylvan pagan deities known as the Green Men appear. So I mean, even more. One arc depicts a richly detailed dance macabre in which figures waltz with their future skeletons. A double-humped camel makes a curious appearance, even though such an animal was rare in Scotland at the time. And stories from both the New and Old Testament appear again and again. Is this as occultic and esoteric as legend has it and stories are telling?
Yes. So speaking the scenes from the Bible that they are showing in the chapel, you have to remember at this time, not everybody was literate. So a lot of these scenes they're depicting were representing literally the Bible in stone, so that people could walk through the chapel and see the different stories and learn the different stories of the Bible. And with that said, there's plenty of carvings that are very intriguing that don't really fit the Christian narrative, that definitely have esoteric and occult links. Like, for example, the green men that you find all around. As you follow all of the green men around the chapel, you see it starts out as a young green man, and then by the end, it's an aged, older green man. And this has to do with the cycle of life and death and resurrection. And the green man was a symbol of fertility that you find all around ancient Celtic traditions and cultures. And in fact, there's a site called Denino Den that is not about an hour from Rosyln, an hour north. It's across the Firth of Forth, near St. Andrews. And there you'll find in this den amazing, beautiful, intricate Celtic carvings. And there's a beautiful carving of a green man there too. So Rosyln Chapel has always been a temple that honored both the old ways, the old traditions, and is also honoring the new ones in its own way, because it was built to be a Catholic church. But now it's still actually used as a church. They still have mass that you can attend there and everything.
So, speaking of the Catholic Church, and you were talking about its history not really being well known, I understand that around the year 1600, many of the altars were burned, and I guess a lot of the history was destroyed.
Yeah, so Oliver Cromwell and brought his men to camp there. Basically, they kept the horses inside the chapel. They destroyed a lot of the carvings. Some of them haven't even been repaired to this day. A lot of them have been repaired, but there are still things missing that he probably stole and broke that have just never been able to be replaced. And when this happened, it was because of the Protestant Jacobite uprisings that were taking place. And so this is when King James was deposed from the throne in England. And at this point in time, then you had Anne that came in. I believe it was Anne and her husband, and it might have been a different woman, but pretty sure it was her and her husband. And they were Protestant. So because they were Protestant, everybody welcomed them in the UK and Britain at the time. Whereas King James was Catholic and he was tolerant, so he had allowed everybody to believe the Protestant religion or the Catholic. But the people didn't want that. They all wanted to be Protestant now in England. So they overthrew King James, and thus they became a Protestant country. And in Scotland, there were still a lot of people that were secretly being Catholics. And Oliver Cromwell and his army basically went and destroyed all of the Catholic temples and churches, cathedrals that were existing still at that time. And it was really sad because now they started to use cathedrals that were Catholic at one point for Protestant work again, or the Church of Scotland now. But it's just very sad to see ancient places.
Okay, so am I right that it had languages like Egyptian languages in there? And
I really like there's not hieroglyphics or anything like that you find in there. No.
oh, okay. So could you speak more on the languages that you find, or some of the inscriptions, something that
Yeah.
I
So
didn't touch on?
there's actually one really intriguing carving, and it's actually near, I believe it's near where the 7 deadly sins are shown. And it says, it's a very curious phrase. Nobody really understands what it means, but it says, wine is strong, the king is stronger, women are stronger still, but the truth conquers all. And I'm probably slightly, messing it up a little bit, but it's to that effect. And the truth conquers all, right? So, and what does that mean to you? Like, if you're thinking about this phrase, what does that mean? Does that
I
make
would imagine that, like, the truth about reality itself, not just like personal truth, but total truth.
right? And in
Maybe.
esoteric and occult circles, the truth is light. That is enlightenment. That is pure enlightenment. And so when Rosyln was built, and I was saying earlier, maybe it was built to be a reliquary of all these ancient manuscripts and documents and things. Perhaps that is what they were referring to as the truth or as the light, right? So the wine is strong, the king is stronger, women are stronger still, but the truth conquers all. So it's kind of a beautiful, really intriguing phrase that you find carved into the walls of Rosyln Chapel, and you can stare up at it, and it's beautiful. But nobody really knows who carved it, why, or when, and what the actual purpose of it was. So there's a lot of small things like that you'll find around the chapel that just don't really make sense. But you mentioned earlier the Nordic connection to the apprentice pillar, and that's where you have the 8 dragons and such things. And so one of the pillars that's the apprentice pillar, and then there is the master mason's pillar as well. And there's a story there that you actually find a lot in different ancient buildings or cathedrals about the story of a master mason getting angry and striking his apprentice. And it's something you find in Masonic circles as well that you hear a lot about. But in this case, supposedly this young apprentice was studying and wanted to build this beautiful ornate pillar in Rosyln. And so he was looking at all kinds of different architecture he could use. And in the meantime, the master mason had gone abroad to go and gain inspiration for this pillar. But while he was away, the apprentice built this incredible, beautiful ornate pillar incorporating all the different Nordic traditions, maybe that were ancestral links to the Sinclairs and their own heritage. So as he's building this pillar, and he completes it, the master mason returns, and he is so angry that this pillar that he was supposed to create, that he was supposed to build as the master mason, has been created now by his apprentice. and he's so angry and jealous that he strikes him, and he hits him in the head and kills him. But this is parallel to the Masonic story of Hiram Abiff, when he is struck and killed as well, and because he won't give away the secret passwords to the vault. And so you find a lot of links to Masonic tradition, and even Masonic tradition comes from the more ancient traditions of Osiris and Isis and the Egyptian death and resurrection traditions, the mystery traditions that are found in all ancient cultures, really. So there's much of that that's interwoven into Rosyln Chapel's walls and carvings and so much more. Like the Green
Can you delve a little bit more into that Nordic, the history and the folklore behind the artist and what he was thinking, what he was trying to incorporate?
Well, it was actually meant to be, I believe it was the tree tethered the earth to heavens, and I'm not even going to try to say the name, but it's a very strong point in Nordic mythology, and the Sinclairs were said to have had Viking ancestry, and if you're familiar at all with Orkney, they had been the Earls of Orkney, which was above Scotland, mainland Scotland, and I've been there, and it's lovely. There's some beautiful stone circles up there, but it gave them a great vantage point because they could leave Scotland, basically go to Orkney, and then take their voyages over to America or wherever they were going without really being seen. So it gave them the ability to basically operate covertly. And up in Orkney, there's a strong Viking Nordic heritage there. And so even, for example, there is a passage tomb that's megalithic and dates back probably anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 years. And this is Maze How, I believe. And there is Scandinavian found in there, runes, along with Templar carvings. So these Scandinavian runes that they use here actually were Crusader knights, Templar knights that were inside during a storm or something or other, and they were bored and they were carving on the wall, but they were using runes because these Templar knights that were in Orkney were also obviously Scandinavian. And so the link between the Templars, the runes, the Scandinavians, it's very strong because you obviously have the Templars that were connected to the Sinclairs in Orkney. There is actually in the cathedral that's there, I believe it's St. Magnus Cathedral, there is a beautiful effigy of a Knights Templar sword. And this effigy is what they used. They always would put a sword basically to mark a grave for a Templar. And so you find a beautiful example of that in the cathedral in Orkney. And so Orkney was just a great vantage point for those that were sailing west, whether it was to Greenland, Iceland, to the New World. It was a fantastic vantage point for the Sinclairs to basically come and go as they pleased. And with that, they were also going back and forth to Denmark. They had connections with that side of the world. Trade was a big part of their life as well. So it just made their ability to come and go discreetly possible. And their connections with the old world, with the Scandinavian, I'm not sure how deep that runs. I know some people have looked back into the ancestry even further of the Sinclairs and where they came from mythologically, connections to the Merovingians and such things. I have a friend named Steve St. Clair who actually runs the St. Clair DNA project. So he would be the person to ask on this because there's a lot of information out there that's not entirely accurate. And he was telling me basically there is a lot of different stories about how the St. Clairs came to be, where they came from, and what the DNA tells us, which is a slightly different story actually, as to where the origins of the St. Clairs were from.
All right, that is powerful information. We can dive into it if you would like. We could also go ahead and talk about if you want. Do you want to talk something about that? I mean, or I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to talk to who he proposed. Maybe I could if I reach out to him, but
Out to Steve, you might be able to chat with him about this stuff. He does a job with all of it. It's a little bit over my head, but that's if you're interested in the origin of St. Clair's.
yes. Okay. Thanks. I appreciate that. Well, okay. So along with the Rosyln Chapel, it seems like we had touched on cymatics earlier. Now, inside, it seems like there is references to hymns or a tune. Now, it almost looks like it is its own musical nature. Correct? We had mentioned briefly that.
I have a friend named Annie, Annie Williams, and I believe that she might have done something. You might be able to find her on YouTube. She uses sound for healing. She plays music to heal, and she does this with the purpose of healing, and she studies frequencies to see what they can do and how they can benefit people, what types of things they can be used to heal. And I believe that she had mentioned something about it to me, but like I said, that's kind of beyond me. With Rosyln, I've spent many days there, and every time I go into the chapel, I'm learning and finding something new. Every different guide that's there has something new to share with me that I didn't hear before. I mean, it's truly a place that you can continue to go and learn. And to be honest, the chapel itself is just absolutely stunning. When you walk inside, you see all these stones. The carving is in stone, showing the scenes from the Bible, but there's also supposedly, a carving of the two Templars on the horse. You have these Templar references. You have some beautiful Mason's marks that are found on the pillars there. Some that have the hooked X. The X was always an ancient symbol that represented the union of male and female that's found all around the world. Like, for example, in Ireland at the Hill of Tara, there is a stone there that has X's carved into it, and it's because it has an alignment. I can't remember if it was solstice or equinox, but the sun penetrates the chamber. It's the allegorical impregnation of the earth. And the X is the male and the female joined together in union, just as heaven and earth joins there. Now, at Newgrange, also in Ireland, you see that 8 X's are carved above New. So it's the same thing. And at Rosyln, these Mason's marks that you're finding on the pillars there, and these are obviously recent when this was built. But we're talking about a symbol that's been used for thousands of years. These stonemasons were using that same sacred symbol. And if you talk to Scott at all about the hooked X, you'll know why that's so important, because there's several hooked X Mason's marks that are found in Rosyln Chapel that carry on that Grail ideology, the bloodline, the idea of this Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which was the goddess ultimately.
And that is fascinating how that correlates with it being known for a goddess. I mean, in its history, there's goddess symbolism. See, in the ancient world, these symbolisms were very powerful. They were prominent in all types of culture, and it shows. So I'm reading more. I mean, this, as you said, there is so much to talk about this. Stone cubes on the back of the chapel with strange symbols remind of. So we also think that this is one of the most historical places for education. You said, right? You said that this was meant to be a library. So you can imagine that all of these symbols and, the thing, like I just said, the Enneagram would actually probably come from the educational institution. Can you speak more of the educational institution? Because I did also see that William St. Clair and the founders, or, when its popular days, this was supposed to be a centerpiece for education. Yes.
It was built with the intention of being a college, ultimately. And I believe it was the College of Matthew. I can't remember exactly which. I think it was St. Matthew, but it was meant to be a college for people to come and study and learn, and likely even be initiated, on a more esoteric level. You have to look at things with the exoteric perspective as well as the esoteric. The exoteric is the outside, what we see on the outside, while the esoteric is the more secretive circle, which actually with the Templars was a very big thing. You had most people looking at the Templars, just seeing them for what they were, which were bankers, merchants, sailors. They were helping transport these goods, but also guarding the people on the way to the Holy Land. They were fighting these holy wars. But that was just on the exoteric scale, because if you go deeper and you look inside, there was only a small circle of knights that were truly, the part of the esoteric, part of the, not necessarily a cult, but part of the more ancient traditions that they were upholding. And so at Rosyln, I think that there was probably the same thing happening. You probably had people coming to genuinely study the Bible and understand the mysteries of the Bible, whereas you also had those that had the eyes to see, or they were coming to learn or be initiated maybe into a more ancient practice there. So I think that probably was existing for multiple reasons, as a college, maybe as somewhere that they were initiated, maybe for other purposes, maybe just they were housing artifacts there. And there was even an article, interestingly, or a letter that was written from the mother of Mary, Queen of Scots, to Sinclair, to the Sinclairs at the time, and she mentions that she had been, I think it was William at the time, he shared with her the great secret of Rosyln, and she was saying, thank you for trusting me with this, or for sharing this with me. So it just confirms that this we're talking about, you know, after Mary Queen of Scots at this point is born, and there's this ongoing relationship between the royal Stuarts and the Sinclairs, and a secret that's guarded at Rosyln. And in my book, I do mention this because it's really interesting. It alludes to the fact that this mysterious element to Rosyln isn't something that's just been created recently, because it wasn't until the movie Da Vinci Code was produced and came out that really a lot of people began looking into Rosyln, studying it, trying to understand the mysteries here. So a lot of people will try to debunk it and just say, oh, you know, this was only brought on with the onset of the Da Vinci Code being written and the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, all these things. But if you look back, everybody else thought that there was something secret here. They thought there was something mysterious about Rosyln. They all knew something was going on. As to what it was, we don't know, but the mystery has always been there. That's definitely not new. The secret that they were guarding, we can only guess now.
Well, okay, you had mentioned earlier that there is a castle underneath and there's underground tunnels. Now, if I'm going to just put my ideas together, the Temple of Solomon and the lesser known Keys of Solomon, which is a very magical book on knowing how to control spirits, I would imagine that these dudes took those type of texts, those type of ritual artifacts down into that castle. They started performing things. Now, okay, just for my viewers at home, also, Rosyln Castle is on the, what is it, Full Star Triangle, where a UFO hotspot is it within that hotspot? The Falkirk Triangle. Do you know about that?
I am not super familiar with that, but I've heard it before. I do know that a lot of really strange things happen.
Okay, so Falkirk Triangle is actually around, yes, Roslyn's above it. So Rosyln lies in the Falkirk Triangle. We know about Bermuda Triangle, Dragon's Triangle, Devil's Triangle, this Falkirk Triangle. There's a lot right now. If we kind of use some of these ancient stories and also I would say alternative stories, you know, hidden stories about what these triangles actually are, underground bases and bases for very powerful technology or spell work. Okay, so I want to go ahead and ask you mentioned that it's very interesting to stay there for 3 nights. Have you ever experienced any type of spirits, or do you know about the spiritual nature? Because I do understand that it is a very mystical place, all that surrounding area. So can you speak on the paranormal, or, you know, maybe some of the spirits, you know?
Yeah, so when I stayed there personally, I had never, I didn't know at the time about the Battle of Rosyln that involved my ancestor, Lady Margaret Ramsey. I was not aware of that when I was staying there. So all I knew was that there might be a ghost that shows up at midnight and starts singing about the treasure. I was skeptical, but you know, I was there for it, so I stayed up and I waited till midnight. I did not hear the White Lady singing about the treasure, unfortunately. I guess I was not deemed worthy. But what I did hear was some fighting that sounded like maybe just kids smashing bottles or fighting, or I don't know what. I heard something outside, and it could have been nothing. It could have just simply been kids down in the glen by the river. But then later on, it occurred to me, I was actually on the plane flying home when I was reading about the Battle of Rosyln. And it occurred to me then, maybe what I was hearing down there, because it sounded like metal clashing almost, you know, it didn't sound like kids fighting like the way that they would fight today. But it occurred to me that potentially what I heard might have been the spirits, the energy that lingered there after the Battle of Rosyln that took place that involved one of my ancestors. And it gave me chills. I mean, honestly, it could have been nothing and it could have been something. But what I do know is there is a story that I read about this 2 young kids that had gone down into the glen, and they were just playing for the day. And when they went down into the glen, they went to the specific spot, this little alcove, and I know exactly where it is. And I've been down to this exact spot myself multiple times. And they went down here, and from this little alcove, if you climb down into the riverbed, there's just a little spot above the water level where you can kind of sit and it's almost like a little cave that hangs overhead, very small, but you can sit down there. 2 people maybe can fit in it. And when they were sitting down there, you can look across the river and see on the wall on the opposing side that there is actually ancient carvings that are like spirals and ancient symbols, probably dating back a few thousand years. So this glen we know is inhabited for thousands of years, always seen as being a very sacred and special, powerful site. And so the kids sit there, they're chatting, they're hanging out for a while, and then they decide, okay, it's getting dark, we should head back up. But when they head back into town, everybody is upset with them and freaking out and saying, well, where have you been? Where have you been? They'd been gone for 24 hours. But they didn't know that. To them, it was just a few hours had gone by. And so this was totally bizarre to them, obviously, because they thought they just spent the afternoon hanging out down in the glen, but in reality, it had been an entire day that they had lost. They lost time here. So I firmly believe that Rosyln probably is some type of portal or has those connections now.
Okay, quickly, let's talk about. Do you know about the symbols in the Glen Cove, that area that you're speaking of? What type of symbols were on the rocks? And
Gilmerton Cove?
Yeah, so you said that there were symbols carved into the rocks.
Okay, so this is just this cove area. There is a place called Gilmerton Cove I can talk about that's nearby. It's another really cool Templar site. But firstly, I'll talk about the symbols that were there, and I have a picture of them somewhere. They're just basically like spirals and that sort of thing. It's nothing, there's only a couple of them there, and it's in a really hard to access spot. So whoever climbing over there to carve those spirals, they were brave, because I would not get where they were to carve those things. With the spiral there, it just makes me think the symbol has always to me represented time. It has represented infinity. You know, there is no beginning, there is no end. And so the fact that they were sitting right there across from that symbol when they lost time, I just find completely ironic. But who knows? There is a place called Gilmerton Cove nearby. Actually, it's pretty close to both Dalhousie Castle and Rosyln, and it's closed currently. I was going to take my tour group there this summer when I were leading the Scotland Unearthed tour there, and unfortunately they're closed because they need funding to basically make it safe again. It's an underground cave, and it's really intriguing because nobody really knows who or what it was used for thousands of years. There's stories about Druids being there, the Templars being there. It's underground caves that are definitely man-made. They're hand-tooled, they're worked, and there's walls, separate rooms, chambers. There's even this long table that has a carving of what looks like some kind of like libation bowl in it, like some sort of bowl carved into the stone there. And just next to it, there is a symbol that looks like a Masonic symbol, which is called the AVM symbol, and it was a Hail Mary, basically. It was their AVM kind of condensed into a small symbol. And in medieval times, they called that the witch's mark. But to the Templars revered the sacred feminine. And so Virgin Mary was what represented the mother goddess to them. And that AVM symbol being right there near that bowl tells me that there likely was a presence taking place. And not to mention, there is potential solar alignment that occurred there if they weren't covered up, which we are talking about trying to find a way to expose them if they were there. There's another chamber that has what looks like a stone bed and a pillow, and there's even a little notch there, which I think it might have been used for burial or setting the body out. Maybe it could have been used for a tomb or for whatever kind of ritual purposes. But the reason why I believe that is because at the very end of the bed, there's kind of a small notch that's set to keep the body's foot or the bottom of the shoe there so that they sit upright. And I've observed that at some other sites as well. So I believe that whole underground complex of these chambers was used maybe earlier by the Druids, maybe by the ancient Celtic people, and then probably later by the Knights. It was then used later during the Prohibition in Scotland as a bar, so people could go drink there. So there's a lot happening at Gilmerton Cove, but that's just there near Dalhousie and Rosyln, kind of right in that same area just south of Edinburgh, where everything was connected. And at Gilmerton Cove, there's tunnels that ran all the way to Rosyln underground and all the way to Edinburgh Castle, supposedly. But they've since they're not safe to go through.
That is a lot to unpack. All right. You had mentioned that, there's something like a portal feeling there. Is it? It's on a hill, correct? This area is kind of on a hill above area.
Which area? Rosyln?
Rosyln. Rosyln.
Yeah, so Rosyln kind of is on a hill. Then when you're at the chapel, you're overlooking the river just below, and then if you walk down kind of a winding path, you'll get down to a lower part where the castle sits right on the edge of the river, and it's actually built into the natural stone there.
Okay, yeah. So hills are always known for high energy, mystical properties. Yes, sometimes like portal locations, the electromagnetic energy would be high there. Now there is stories about it, yes, being a portal, and Henry St. Clair used that property to gain the spiritual ability to look backwards and forwards through time. And there's just a lot of speculation about it being a portal. Can you touch more on that? Do you know more on that? The folklore possibly behind that?
I know there's a lot of ancient stories about that specific glen, and people appearing. This is something that goes back hundreds of years, kind of tales that have just been passed down. And we are true, but those stories are there. And in my opinion, obviously they had to come from somewhere. So with the time these kids experienced, which was kind of more recent in the grand scheme of things, I think that that's super intriguing. I was a little nervous myself when I went down there, not down there, but I didn't lose time. I didn't lose 24 hours, thankfully. I have explored a lot of things along there. Is kind of there's a walled garden that is really beautiful there, and they have what's called a grandfather tree there and the grandmother tree, and I know that the monks use that. I'm not sure exactly for it's a lot of concentrated a lot of people in the area for thousands of years, which would allude to the fact it had to be some kind of sacred area. There had to be something about it that was drawing them there. Certainly, I believe that it's on a ley line, Rosyln, and the ley lines are the energy points essentially in the Earth's orbit, right? So I think that Rosyln, that area specifically, I need more. There is more research on it, but it certainly is a magical area. And the Pictish people that were inhabiting the area for going back 2,000 years, right around the time of King Arthur, actually, there is links to King Arthur there. And it was always a mystical area, Rosyln, and just downstream, down the river from Rosyln Castle now, there is what looks like old ruins on the river. We took our group down there. There's like this little passageway that you can walk through right down to the water, which maybe was used for mythical or for mystical purposes, for initiations, for baptism, or for who knows what. But this was a very small little ruined area, and there's ruins of walls as well. And anything that maybe was an ancient fort that was used, or maybe ancient temple used right on the water. And it's just such a serene, beautiful, peaceful place. I feel like anything's possible there. And there used to be somewhere else along the river, there was supposedly the first castle, Rosyln Castle, that was before the one that's still there today. It's on the Vinci Code at the very end. So nobody has located the remains of their castle yet. But this one little temple that's down on the river might have been used by the ancient people for some sort of initiation or ritual. As far as the portal part of it, I don't know. The whole place feels like a portal to me. The energy is insane there. It's stunning and it's insane and it's just so peaceful.
Now, so one of the pillars shows a row of what certainly looks like corn, and it correlates to an ancient story how they brought back maize or corn, and that you mentioned it's being correlated with King Arthur. So I know King Arthur has some remnants and stories about him being over here in America. If these dudes were using portals, I can imagine there is some type of correlation, because also there's a Westford, Massachusetts rock with carvings that interpret a depiction of a 14th century knight, and it being correlated to this Rosyln Chapel. Now, yeah, I would imagine. Look, personally, I do believe in portals. I believe in the paranormal. I mean, I understand it myself. I had a mystic tell me that I was on two vortexes, and that actually correlates with my dreams. I mean, my dreams have been telling me that. So I know this area actually about like 60 minutes away from me. There is a Stonehenge-like structure very near to me. So it's interesting. They say it was created in the 1900s, but I actually think that these things were an ancient druid technology. These locations, these churches, these temples, like places like Stonehenge. Can you talk a little bit more about your ideas and what the druids, a little bit of the folklore and history there, and how they involve themselves in all of this?
Yeah, so let's back up a second. You were talking about Massachusetts and Westford, Mass. I am very familiar with the Westford Knight carving there. In fact, we just did our America Unearthed tour where we stopped at the Westford Knight, and it's not in fact a knight carving so much as it is the sword. And remember earlier I was mentioning that the effigies used to mark a Templar grave were always a sword, a Templar sword. And so this here probably was marking a fallen Templar knight. And this was probably one of the Templars that was there wintering with the Sinclairs during one of their voyages over. The corn, yes, the corn is native to North America, not native to the UK. So definitely would be a symbol, kind of just a subtle hint there that they were, in the New World, and that they had maybe brought it back with them, or they'd seen it there. And then with the Westford, Massachusetts, there is also the Westford boat stone, which you can view, which is in the Westford Library just down the road. And it's the carving of a boat, but then there's some strange symbols that no one's really decoded that are beneath it, probably related to the same party, I would have to guess. And in the same area, if you just go down the coastline a little bit more, you end up in Newport, Rhode Island. So many Templar artifacts there. It's crazy. You have the Newport Tower, which some say is meant to be a portal, but it's a Venus observatory. You can observe the sun, the moon, and Venus there, and probably other planetary bodies as well. If you were able to dive into it, you can observe so many different things there. And on the solstice at wintertime at 9 a.m., you see an illumination of the stone there, and it's that same allegorical union of male and female, heaven and earth, that takes place. So then nearby there was found the Narragansett rune stone with the hooked X on it. And then also that was discovered a little ways away from the Newport. There's a stone that popped up, or not popped up, but kind of became known to everybody back in 2020. And there was a really bad storm, and it's the short monolith that has the AVM carving, that same AVM, Ave Virgo Maria symbol that I found in Gilmerton Cove, down near that libation bowl. And this monolith is erected facing east towards the Holy Land, towards Jerusalem, with that symbol facing that way. And so in the area in New England, there's so many sects that are connected. And then not far from there, still in Newport, you have another stone, which is called the Intoxic Novices stone. And it says Intoxic Novices, which was the battle cry of the Templar. And it's inscribed in the stone that's on the beach there. So you have all these different Templar artifacts, carvings, and things popped up around Newport, around the whole New England area, which might have been known to the ancient mariners as Vinland, perhaps. And then with the Druids, they always had, they were known to have connections to the oak tree. The oak tree was a very sacred thing to them, and that's part of the tie-in with Oak Island, is these trees had to have been planted here, these oak trees. And maybe that was a tie to the Druids or the ancient people that were coming here. The groves of oak trees were a very sacred place to the Celtic people and to the ancient Druids.
Okay, Hayley, we are sitting at an hour, but I know that you only have like 45 minutes left. Do you want to take a quick break? Do you need a water break, or do you just want to keep on rolling it? Your call. I just wanted to offer you, the hour courteous break mark.
Yeah, I'll definitely have some water. That'd be great.
So yeah, you want to take like a quick 3-minute break?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Let me go ahead and do this.
Gonna go far, that's what we on the run for, go hard. Sipping gin while we sitting, spitting those bars. Getting rich, got a vision, get the show cards. Lot of money laying around cause we go hard, always go hard. Spitting fire, see the sonar, hope they resonate with the vibe. Feel like Mozart, really I'm alive in my soul. Feel like Mozart, that's what hoes are. Too explosive so I show art. Yeah, I make art, sad to see people with no heart. I work to replace all of the negative, I go far with it. I'ma show all of these bitches, no complaining if you with it. Don't you drain me, see the vision, need my energy, the mission. Really take all my precision. Every single day I picture where I'll be the day we get it. Feed the brothers, feed the fam. I don't really give a damn. I don't wanna get famous. I wanna lend a hand. Give the cash and rubber bands to the people always standing on my side, always down the ride. Say I planned it. I'm the guy, life is supersized on the planet. In my mind, I don't gotta try, I already have it. I be doing damage. I was born a savage. In my mind, I already died, living lavish. Heaven is a state of mind. Be glad if you have it. Living in a simulation, be patient to grab it. Universe will bring it to you if you ain't an average. If you live an average and Satan found to manage your life. I'm just trying to tell you if you gonna roll the dice. Gamble in your life instead of living precise. I ain't perfect, but I'm gonna earn it. No, it don't concern anybody but my person. Lesson that I learned is that people are gonna burn. Anything you do, they gonna pay the price. Nothing nice come in life for the dipshits. They just wish shit, never gonna manifest it. Never catch me resting, short-term blessings. I just want my brain to work so I can write my next hit. Ignite the blessings, manifest my life, never question a moment in my life. I be knowing that it's meant to be, this my destiny. All the rest of my life really history. The day that I'm finally gone, they'll be missing me. Your position be the reason that I'm gone. 200 songs done, I've been on the run. I ride a wave, make a way, I'm the one. I stay the same, but I'm changing a ton. Rearranging my brain for the gains through the sun. I've been absorbing the light, I could say that I won. At least I'm conscious of what I'm doing, praying a ton. Relay all the information, staying patient with the shit. I write a hit just to get through all the shit. I ain't a bitch, so I'll make it. I ain't dealing with the prick. I'm finna take over the game. Really, I'm getting in. I'm really glad that you're here to witness it. I'm about to fix entire rap game. You could call it magic, like a trick. Plastic with the way I spit it. It be clapping when it hits. I be snapping on this shit. I've been rapping, feeling lit. I'm
Ooh, okay. Caught me in the middle of a bong hit. Now, hey guys, welcome back. So, how'd you guys like that first hour? We are headed into another cool segment. Hey, Hayley. So, is there anything that I missed? I mean, of course, there's like thousands of stories about this place. Let's go ahead and dive right back into it. Hello, you there? I can't hear you. See, you glitched.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, we're back. We're good.
You know, it's interesting because that one specific area has all these mythical ties, and there's a few other places in Scotland that also have these kind of strange happenings taking place. And I would say probably down in out in the Western Hebrides, in the islands and out in the western part of Scotland in what's called Argyll. There are some really strange things there and stories that tie into the real King Arthur, who was actually not even a king, but he was the son of a king, and it was his brother that became king. And this was Arthur. I'm trying to think of his father's name, but he was actually a prince there, and this was in the kingdom of Dalriada. So the story of the Sword and the Stone supposedly came from a place called Dinad Fort, and Dinad Fort in Gaelic, Dune means rocky hill, or hill, and so up on the Dinad Fort, this is where all the royals in this family were crowned, or in this settlement were crowned, and this was the capital of the kingdom here. So the western part of Scotland is full of these stories of fairies and of King Arthur and these battles and mythical happenings. And at Dinad Fort itself, there are some carvings there as well. There's like a carving of a boar, I believe. There's a footprint that's right on top of the hill, which is where supposedly the kings were crowned. And this is the point in time where the story emerged, and being just below that, the people would watch and they'd be up, and as the king would kneel with his sword, foot in that carved foot, now smaller because my foot's a size 7 and my foot fits perfectly, and kneel down, put their foot in the carving of the footprint, have their sword, and then they would be, raised as a king. Now, to the people that were looking on from below, this looked forward from the stone. Thus, the story of the sword and the stone was born. Now, there are other theories how the story of the sword and the stone came to be that also makes sense, but this is the most story that I've heard that is relevant to Dinad Fort, to Scotland, where the rehistoric King Arthur lived. And all over the UK, there are stories of King Arthur, 12 battles he fought across Scotland, that the castle has been built with a stone there. Initially had connections to 9 maidens before, going back to ancient times. There's an Arthurian now called Arthur's Seat. And it's a very strenuous hike, some of the pathways that you can take. But it's worth it because it's beautiful and it's stunning. But when you get up there to this top part of Arthur's Seat, the hill there's a beautiful peak, and it almost looks like ruins of his have been around the between the 5th and 7th centuries AD, that this historic King Arthur lived. And not only that, but nearby you have the story of King Arthur of the Picts maybe being in Rosyln. And then just not on farther from there, Stirling, there's actually beneath Stirling Castle, there is a round table. there's no better way to call it that, but that's what we started calling it, is the round table. The reason being because this was actually an earthwork that is there now, and it's in the royal gardens down below the castle. So when you walk up to it, it just looks like one big earthwork, but in the center there is a circular earthwork that is older than all of the other earthworks. Some of them date back to the 16th. Circular structure that sits in the middle of it actually dates back to, I believe, the 6th century AD. It might be give or take, might be 5th to 7th century. It's somewhere right around there, but it's the oldest part of the structure, and everything else was built up around it later on. So this might have been the real King Arthur's round table. And in historical documents and different texts, they refer to King Arthur's round table as being in this general area. And here it's literally just beneath the castle, in Stirling. And so what it was actually used for, because it's actually massive, it's a huge structure, you can go and stand on it. We took our tour group actually, and there was, I believe, 14 of us total, that we went and stood on top of it and took a photo there. So it's a pretty big thing. And you have to wonder, what was the round table actually being used for? Was it a meeting place? Was it a place for ritual? Was it symbolic of something? What was it actually used for, if that in fact is the real round table of King Arthur?
Whoa. That is amazing. Okay, so you had mentioned something a little bit. You talked a little bit about fairies. I was actually going to ask earlier, what are the stories and the folklore about any type of cryptids? I mean, look, over here in Washington State, we got stories of Bigfoot. Over there, you say fairies. Can you brush on this?
Yeah, so the fairies were these supernatural beings that dwelled upon the hills, the dunes, where there were stone circles, chambers, burial chambers that were all ancient megalithic sites. So the fairies were in essence like the spirits that were there, and sometimes they even believed certain people might have been fairies if they were possessed by the spirit of a fairy. I think that the ancient people were more scared of the fairies than anything. Or not maybe the ancient people so much, but in the last, I would say 500 to 1,000 years or so, the stories of fairies have always put fear into people. Like there's a story about the changeling, which was basically a baby that if it died, the parents would go and set it up on a fairy hill. And so hopefully the fairies would come and change the baby, and the baby would survive, or it would go and live forever with the fairies if it died. You know, if the body was still there and it died, then supposedly the spirit of that baby would go and live with the fairies forever and be, you know, okay. But that was really a story, obviously, that was created to help soothe parents that had babies that were unhealthy and that weren't going to make it. But in other terms, they were scared of fairies, and some ways they were fearful of them, but also respected their power. So they never wanted to upset the fairies or make the fairies mad, because they wanted to carry slightly onwards. The stories of the fairies were kind of lost to a lot of people that died, because the Highland traditions were killed. Really, there's still some around, and there's still some knowledge of the traditions and the stories that were passed down. But at the Battle of Culloden in 1746, when the British government forces killed so many Scots, so many Jacobites at that last battle, the Highland culture and the ways really died with them, because the English forbid the Scots to speak Gaelic. They forbid them to wear tartan, their plaids. They weren't allowed to wear their kilts or carry on any of the same songs or traditions that they once had. So a lot of the stories and a lot of the traditions, maybe of the fairies or of other mythical beings that might have existed, that they might have talked about and passed down, a lot of that was probably lost. There's been a lot of it written down as well, but it's a shame that so much of the culture has just been wiped away, and they're just now starting to really appreciate the culture and dive back into it and speak Gaelic and learn the language again and learn the old stories, the old ways of the Highland people. I mean, it was really, really sad what happened to them, because they were a very mythical sort of people. And out there, especially if you go out into the Western Hebrides, the Outer Hebrides, there's a site called Callanish Stone Circle. And that is kind of the iconic stone circle that you think of when you think of Scotland. And it's beautiful, and it has 13 stones in the center in the main circle. And when I got there, it just completely felt like divine feminine energy, but it felt so magical too. And I had also, I have a tradition I was talking about, spreading my dad's ashes. Whenever I go to a new site that I think that he would have loved, that he'd never been to, I spread some of them and have kind of made a ritual of it myself. And so when I went to Callanish Stone Circle, I went and took off my shoes and just walked around barefoot and connected with the earth, and just was overwhelmed with the energy I felt there, and spread some of my dad's ashes. But the 13 stones were there, and the 13 obviously is tied directly to the divine feminine, to the goddess. And so it was that Venus and the islands feel like untouched. The people that lived there, these Highlanders at the time, or the islanders that lived out on the islands, they were very spiritual people. And even though Christianity came at that point in time, you have to remember that they were still integrating Christianity with the old ways of their ancestors. So a lot of them still believed in these creatures, these fairies, or in their own supernatural legends and lore of the area, that now people that are Christian would say, oh no, that was all made up. But back then they integrated their old religion with the new religion. And even on the Isle of Iona, a very magical place also, Iona is Hebrew for dove, which means the dove is a symbol of the Holy Spirit. And also for thousands of years, it was a symbol of the goddess. And out on Iona, supposedly Mary Magdalene is rumored to be buried there. But at some point in time, rumor has it, according to the locals, that Jesus and Mary Magdalene came there with their child. And there's stories all across the islands and the highlands of Scotland about a wandering Christ child and its mother, Mary. So there's a lot going on out in the western part of Scotland. There's the ties to King Arthur. There's the ties. And oh, speaking of King Arthur, Iona supposedly is out. And Mary Magdalene buried there, it makes me wonder, is there some kind of connection between Jesus and Mary Magdalene's lineage and King Arthur's? Because Argyll, in the western part of Scotland, I was mentioning earlier.
There's rumors of Jesus's head being there, so it could be. Just to talk a little bit, not talk a little bit more. We don't have to talk more about it.
It's a lot to think about.
Right. So just to talk, mention about the fairies in Norway in the 1500s, they had laws on trolls. So these cultures back in the day took these things very serious. So if there were any stories about fairies, I would imagine that they would, as you say, they came from somewhere. They came from something. These stories are passed down with very high regard by, the knowledge keepers. It's fascinating. I'll be honest. Okay, let's go ahead and I want to ask earlier. You said there was monks, and it seemed like yes, there was some type of cymatic essence to this. Do you know anything about any type of specific hymns or chants or mantras, words that maybe were powerful there? That maybe they passed down, that maybe something was repeated there. Hello? It's kind of laggy. I don't know what's up.
Rituals, I'm sure. Frankly, I'm not sure, because whatever they were singing, whatever chants or mantras that they were using in ritual, I'm sure they keep closely guarded. For some reason, I keep thinking hymn to Aten or something Egyptian in nature, but that probably has nothing to do with it. I was working on another artifact that was involved that had the hymn to Aten on it. But I bet you whatever those chants were that they used in Rosyln Chapel, I would love nothing more to be there to witness it and experience it, because I'm sure it is powerful.
I did mention, yes, this is in correlation with the architecture of the Chaldean pattern, which it's just fascinating to see that our history and the people that came before us had very high attunement to reality, to sacred geometry. It's beautiful. I'll be honest. So let's talk a little bit.
Yeah, it is, and I think that. Yeah,
I just want to mention a little bit more. Sorry, go for it.
No worries.
Yeah, go. You're good.
What were you going to say?
No, it's not part. I apologize.
You're
the guest.
It's all right. All good. No, I was just going to mention, recently I've kind of been interested in studying how sound can be used to levitate certain objects. I mean, I know that it's been happening for a long time, but we have this idea in our head about these ancient monks down in parts of the old world that were using sound and mantras and types of music and frequency to levitate or to move things. And that's been another area that I've been wanting to dive more into and learn more about, because I find that fascinating. But also using frequencies even now to heal or to work through certain traumas and different things. And like you were saying, the ancient people were much more attuned with life and with earth and with all that came with it, probably because they didn't have the kinds of distractions that we have today, like electricity, all the technology we have, like electronics, television, all these things that were not influencing our bodies or our minds. And so we had the ability, I think, to tune in more in depth to the earth and to everything around us. The ancient people were so connected, and I think they had so much more wisdom and knowledge in some areas than we do today. I mean, they had it pretty well figured out for the most part. So it's crazy. The more that we learn, the more that we see we've lost in time, I think, over the past few thousand years. There's so much ancient technology, knowledge, healing traditions, and things that just had been lost to time. And I just wonder, you know, where we would be now if we were still able to practice those things. I mean, even something as simple as using the sound frequencies or the chants, or, you know, being able to build these megalithic structures that these ancient people were somehow able to build that we couldn't build today unless we had massive machinery.
Or this is where this turns a little bit more mind-opening. So there's speculation and, you know, ideas about the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail actually being ancient technology. What is your idea on ancient technology and its correlation to this? Maybe some of the stories. See, okay, you know, there's all these tales about, you know, Vermonters, flying Vermonters, people having staffs and rods and magical abilities through these staffs and rods. There's Mitch tales in the Viking legends with Thor and his magical hammers. Okay, do you kind of see that maybe in some way this was correlative? This is
no, I do. I think you're definitely got a point there, because the Ark of the Covenant, ultimately, it's not necessarily one Ark of the Covenant that exists. It's a matter of how do you build it, because it's a technological tool, and it's something that I'm not sure exactly what it's used for, but from what I know and from what I've learned from others that are more in tune with it, that it is something that can be built if you know how to build it. And it's a form of technology that's existed obviously for thousands of years. And going back even further, we have the stories that you're talking about, like with Thor and these rods and these powerful tools that people had that obviously were something that they didn't understand as far as electricity or technology goes, but they knew that it was powerful. They knew that it had to be divine, because it was technology, it was power, and no one else could explain that back then. And the Holy Grail, you know, I never really thought of the Holy Grail necessarily being a tool like that as far as technology goes, but that's a great point. I think that when I've looked at the Grail, I've looked at it on a few different levels. One maybe being the womb of Mary Magdalene, the vessel, or the bloodline of Jesus, or you know, perhaps being the quest for enlightenment. It's the journey that oneself goes on to find enlightenment and to heal, these types of things. But that's a great idea, actually. It's a really interesting point about the Grail actually being technology that was used to heal people. Maybe I hadn't thought about it like that.
Now let's bring this full circle. We had mentioned earlier that there's New Testament and Old Testament entrailings in this. Am I correct? Can you brush on that? So while we wind this down and then go ahead and bring this conversation on for another day.
Yeah. So I know in the Old Testament, the God was very angry, jealous, and constantly raging at people. He was not the loving and forgiving God that we know in the New Testament. But when Adam and Eve had eaten from the tree of forbidden fruit, he became very angry at the Old Testament God, and he told them, "Now you're going to become like us." And it makes you wonder, God was supposed to be one, you know, you're supposed to be worshiping only him. But when he says you're going to become like us, who is the us that he's referring to? Multiple gods?
Yes, I do think that there's multiple creators. I would imagine, just imagine that if there's all these different star systems out there, all these different worlds and, you know, places out there in the solar system, whatever it is, whatever they are, that along with that come different type of entities and different type of beings and their own bloodlines and their own agendas. And if we look at some of the ancient texts, it kind of says the same thing. I would definitely think so. It's so inside of Rosyln Chapel, is there specific quotes, scripts, or detailings of specific parts of the Bible that it like references?
I mean, not necessarily. I think that you have pretty basic carvings that show iconic stories from the Bible kind of around the chapel. And I do think that probably, I think that the Templars and the connection with Rosyln there would probably allude to some understanding or knowledge of what certain things were, like the Grail. They probably had a pretty good idea there at Rosyln, or, you know, their own version of it anyway, because the physical Grail was also said to have been brought to the UK to Glastonbury and down in England by Joseph of Arimathea, who was supposedly Jesus's uncle, but maybe could have been his brother, actually, James the Just, who was the crown prince. And Joseph of Arimathea, according to Gardner, potentially Joseph of Arimathea was just a title, but he brought the Grail supposedly to Glastonbury. But then what happened from there? I mean, he says that he brought the physical cup that had Jesus's blood in it. So that he collected the blood during the crucifixion, but I find that kind of hard to believe. I don't know why that would be so significant, or why he would have brought it to the UK specifically. What was so special about the UK, unless there was already something or someone there that was relevant to his family or to Jesus and Mary Magdalene. I don't know. I think that there is probably a lot going on with the Grail, and could be interpreted as many different things in the different contexts, however you want to apply it. As far as going back to the Bible, in the New Testament, I just find it really strange that you see this really stark contrast between the Old Testament God, who is, angry and just full of wrath and rage, versus the God in the New Testament, who is supposed to be more forgiving and loving, and the things that Jesus is teaching and practicing. But I feel like a lot of what Jesus was really practicing and teaching to the people, which we were talking about exoteric and esoteric earlier, and I think the same applies to Jesus and his disciples. He was teaching specific mysteries to everybody as a whole, publicly, whereas to the disciples privately, or even to Mary Magdalene privately, he was teaching the higher mysteries. And there is a gospel, and I'm forgetting the name of it. It was not included in the Bible, obviously, because this would have been heresy. It was a gospel where Jesus appears to his disciples 11 years after the crucifixion and is teaching them, the higher mysteries now. And he even says to them, Mary Magdalene, she is raised above all of the brethren. She is more enlightened or more aware than all of the brethren here. And so all of the other brethren were not really liking Mary Magdalene too much, because Jesus was very partial to her and taught her things that he didn't teach the others. But I think there is a whole element to this version of what we call Christianity now that has been lost, because it was something that was held sacred and close to one's heart. And God only knows, literally God only knows what Jesus was really teaching. And I think these traditions that Jesus was actually teaching back then really would have been these traditions that came out of ancient Egypt and beyond and before. And for example, one thing I find really interesting is that the word nun, N-U-N, and nuns wear black, and they're supposed to be the wife of Jesus, or wife of God, right, by becoming a nun. Nun is actually a word for the Egyptian goddess that was the god of the primordial waters of creation, or outer space, and so nuns wear black, just like outer space, the color of outer space, the primordial waters were black. That was creation. And it's just strange, these kind of things that you find in Christianity that have traces of the ancient religions of ancient Egypt, just like taking communion when you have the wafer. That was a tradition that came out of ancient Egypt, eating the sun disk every day, right? So, and the blood in the body too, the blood in the body, that tradition, consuming that of the god. The ancient traditions going back to India and even other parts of the world, they would consume menstrual blood, and they would eat, I'm not necessarily parts of the body, but they would drink wine in its place, right, as the menstrual blood. And in some traditions, like down in India and other places, they did actually drink menstrual blood and partake in rituals like that worshipped both the feminine and the masculine part of God. And so with that, in Christianity, we drink wine to represent the blood, and we eat the wafer to represent the sun god. And I find those connections to the ancient religions kind of stark and not even, they're just totally spot on. They're the same thing. And so you just have these pagan elements that are everywhere in Christianity, and nobody really talks about that or explores it as much as they should, because if we really knew what Jesus was actually teaching, I think it'd be a far different version of Christianity than what we've been taught today.
Yes, I am highly familiar with Gnostic Christianity and the truth about what we know about the past. Have you ever heard about Jesus and the Emerald Tablets?
I have heard a little bit about the Emerald Tablets, but not enough. I'd like to hear more about it.
Okay, so it's part of the Essenes. Do you know about the Essenes and maybe Jesus' connections? And so okay, there's tales about the Pyramid Network, Stonehenge Network, the Druids, the Essenes, all of these guys, these magic workers, they know how to manipulate the energies ley lines, like both of us talked about, and yes, I guess traverse through time, traverse through portals, seek knowledge and wisdom through different time periods, and yeah, I would imagine that Rosyln Chapel and Jesus and the Druids and the Essenes, this this is all part of the same story. We are on the same path, I would imagine, as them. I mean, we are learning the same things. We aren't like as high level as that, but like, hey, no, we are like literally following on the same path. This is all to the true essence of the history that is before us. Like, this is, this is gold. This conversation has been gold, Hayley. I'll be honest, this is one of my best podcasts. I was very ready for this. I know your time is running short. Do you want to go ahead and let my viewers know where they can find you and what you got going up and planned?
Yeah,
I mean, I know you got your Scotland tour. We
yeah.
are gonna have you on. This has been a fascinating conversation. We're gonna have you on again.
Yeah,
Talk
well,
more.
thank you for having me. It's been great talking about all this stuff, and I definitely want to hear more about the Emerald Tablets and that sort of thing. My book that's coming out, it'll be out in mid-March, and it's called The Bringer of Life: A Cosmic History of the Divine Feminine, and it's a tale from start to finish of the sacred feminine and everything that she might have touched or have been connected to. So, archaeologically speaking, I talk about why the goddess veneration was the first religion to really exist, and going back thousands of years, as early as 40,000 years ago. And I talk about archaeological sites, stone circles, megalithic structures around the world that ties in these ancient traditions of the goddess. But of course, secret societies like Freemasonry, the Knights Templar, and why she was suppressed. We dive into Grail legend, King Arthur, Scotland, Mary Magdalene, all these different topics. And so a lot of the sites that I've talked about here on this podcast and in my book, you can see if you come on our tour. It's called Esoteric Scotland, and that happens in July. And we'll be visiting sites like King Arthur's Round Table, Stirling Castle, Edinburgh Castle, Gilmerton Cove if it's open this next year, but it might not be. Definitely Rosyln Chapel and the Rosyln Castle as well. And then even going out to Isle of Arran and Iona and some other beautiful places, Denad Fort, where King Arthur was crowned, or where that story of the Sword and the Stone originated from. And we'll also be giving lectures on this tour. I'll lecture twice, the first night and the last night. And the other tour that I'm offering right now is actually, if you've seen the show Outlander, are you familiar with Outlander at all?
Heard of it?
Yeah, so it takes place in Scotland, and it's actually a historical drama. It's about a woman that falls through time. It's just after World War II. She falls through the stone circle and ends up in the 18th century in the Scottish Highlands. And so it's a really cool show. I'm hosting a tour that goes to all the locations where they filmed, and featuring one of the actors who played Bonnie Prince Charlie, Charles Edward Stewart in real life, was his name. And Andrew Gower is the name of the actor that portrayed him in the show, and he'll be joining us there. So the website for that tour is vipoutlanderexperience.com. And as for me, you can get in touch with me on my social media, which is my Facebook is Hayley Allison Ramsey. My Twitter is Hayley A. Ramsey. And my Instagram is Hayley Allison Travels. So you can follow me in my travels there and get in touch that way. Really looking forward to the Scotland tour this year. Last year, we did not have Isle of Arran on there. So this is a new addition this year, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
That is amazing. I would love to go over there personally if I could fit it in my time. I mean, honestly, that sounds amazing. I wish I knew earlier. Look, this is a beautiful year, and this has been a grade A conversation, my friend. You have an amazing time over there. You said you're going to Mexico?
Yes, just across the border in Tijuana.
Yeah, you have an amazing time over there in Mexico. Yeah, my family, I mean, I'm a little bit Mexican. Yeah, full Mexican, but I don't speak too much Spanish. So yeah, I'm Mexican. I love it. You have an amazing time over there. Have an amazing afternoon. You are a beautiful soul with an amazing journey up ahead. Hey, have a great year. Be blessed. Be high. This has been the 509 Divine Plans podcast. And until next time, peace.
Meditating, analyzing everything I see, so I see new horizons. Took the acid, feeling blasted in my brain, so I've been sitting up inside it, thinking about the present and the future. I'm improving cause I am a trooper, never getting caught up in the loop. Got up out it cause I found the truth. Woke up to a beauty of the day, the sun is shining so I'm finna stay. Sitting soaking up all of the rays, till I feel it surging through my brain like some booger sugar. Did a lot of cane, experimented with it, couldn't name all the times I did it, feeling like a fade. Yeah, I'm really glad that I let it go, cause I gotta be prepped for the time when the plane ride is a new norm. So I know I'm gonna stay high, blaze on the ganja, feeling like I make my music go to another level while I take off. I can't ever stop this, fell in love with it, fit like a glove, so I'm never ever done with it. So now I'm about to rip another beat, ayy. One day I'll make a million in a week, yeah, shooting for the top spot. Feel like I'm a hot shot, like I really got a chance with it. I will not flop, somebody gonna make a dance when I pop off. Gonna have all the bitches taking all the tops off. I've been feeling like I'm really gonna kill it for the rest of my life, so I've been staying focused. In my soul, I've been feeling like $1 million, so I know that everything is really getting closer. Yeah, no posers, only been hanging with the ones I've chosen. Only all the people that are living in the right way, cause they spending every day growing. Yeah, no whole shit coming in my life and then leaving in a moment. That's the shit I'll never let into my life again, cause lately I've been feeling like I'm golden. Never showboat, I just showcase on my music that I made this far. Always knew that I could be the one that would get this far. Now I'm right here looking in my mirror, trying to figure out if there's any more fear, cause I'm getting rid of it all, yeah. Yeah, I'm getting rid of it all. Meditating, analyzing everything I see, so I see new horizons. Took the acid, feeling blasted in my brain, so I've been sitting up inside it, thinking about the present and the future. I'm improving cause I am a trooper, never getting caught.